it goes. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Jason Morse, director of the Go School of Real Estate here, alongside instructor extraordinaire, the coolest of instructors. I call him the cool cat instructor. He's so laid back. He's so cool. He's so fun. Rob, I'm just gloating about you. Not bloating, boasting about you.
I'm feeling a little bloated at the moment.
Bloating is what you and I do after class, you know,
Yep,
go to the bar and drink the beers. But that's not why we're here, are we? Why are we here today, Rob?
We are here to discuss license law and rules comments to help our friends, our esteemed colleagues out there in the soon-to-be real estate world pass their PSI state exam.
Yeah, and so this is a section where we tell them from day one, we tell our students from day one, like, this is some serious stuff. This is the majority of the state section of your course exam, as well as the licensing exam that you'll go on to take after you finish the course. This is, again, the license law and rules comments, aka Appendix A, as we refer you to in your textbook. And then specifically from Appendix A, what I call kind of the cliff notes of Appendix A. Is that fair to say, Rob? The cliff notes would be the LLRC.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, take us to that now and show us what's.
Yeah, got a link right here. You can locate this towards the end of your Dearborn textbook. If you use the Dearborn textbook, which Go School students do, at the end, it starts around page 707 in the Dearborn textbook is the license law and rules comments. And so what it is takes all of those laws. You have basically laws passed by the North Carolina legislature, and then you have rules as voted on by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. And this kind of gives a real nice digestible breakdown of those laws and rules comments right here. So I'm a big fan of this section. No matter how many times I read through it, I usually find a little pearl of wisdom that I did not realize before. And so very, very helpful. I'd say probably 30 to 40% of the knowledge you need to pass the real estate exam total, 30 to 40% would be found here. When it comes to the PSI state specific section, probably more like 80% of the material you need to know will be found in this section here. So it's very, very useful, very helpful.
Big chunk. So when we make the strongly worded suggestion and encouragements of read this area of your textbook several times, we mean it. But in addition to that, we're hoping this video will, do some great use, have some great use and benefit out there as we kind of go forward and dive into this a little bit more and talk it out between you and I. So let's take a look at our first section that we want to tackle here.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're going to start with the requirements for a license. And so what we've got in our presentation here, a lot of you have seen this through our classes, is the cliff notes of the cliff notes. So we've tried to kind of break down and give you the key takeaways for the license law and commission rules. And it doesn't get any more important. A great starting point. I try to start all my pre-licensing classes with this information because it's confusing as far as who needs a broker's license. A lot of people think, well, don't I need a license to sell a house? Do I need a license to sell a house? Do I need a license to sell a condo? It depends, right? It depends on a few factors. The most important factor would be, do you own it? Is it yours? Because in North Carolina, and I believe probably most states, you do not need a real estate broker's license to sell or lease property that you personally own. You've heard the term for sale by owner, for rent by owner. And so no license is required to sell property that you personally own. Anything you want to add to that, Jason?
Well, I think, yeah, that's a good point as far as, there's some misconceptions out there about who needs one and who doesn't. I love the acronym that we use here in class, LL-Beans. That's really simple, understandable. But surprisingly, this is, again, a big topic that you'll be tested on. You'll need to understand and identify with some provided scenarios or provided examples which of the following does or maybe does not need the license. And so I like how you list out here with the use again of that LL Beans acronym, some of those important actions that if you take these actions, if your part of your job is to do these things and you're doing it for compensation for others, some important little extensions there, then that's when you need that license. So again, be prepared for identifying some examples of who needs a license and who doesn't based on their actions.
Sure. And I always like to say, one of these days I'm going to get around to jazzing this up over here on the right, the funnel. I call it the martini glass. And you got 3 olives, because I don't drink martinis and I'm afraid of green olives. They freak me out. Yeah. I don't know why. Black olives on pizza all day, green olives in a beverage, I'm probably going to pass. And so, but I say you got 3 olives in the glass over here. And if you take any one of these out, you don't need a broker's license. Say, for instance, take out real property and we're selling personal property, for example, for others for compensation. Could I help Jason sell his boat? Sure. I don't need a broker's license to help Jason sell his boat. I don't need a license to help my son sell his Pokemon card collection. I wish he'd sell it, actually. Maybe we can make some money off it finally. Yeah. But if it's personal property, then you don't need a license. But if you put the real property back in and take out for others, get that out of here. Real property for compensation, that's for sale by owner, for rent by owner. And that is a very popular test question is, hey, Bob Smith owns a condominium in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. Bob Smith, does he need a real estate agent to sell his condo? Well, I would recommend Bob Smith hire a real estate agent because it's probably the best chance that he's going to have to make the most money possible. But Bob does not need to hire a broker. Sellers and buyers in North Carolina have the option of hiring representation when it comes to their real estate transactions, but you can absolutely represent yourself as a seller. You can absolutely represent yourself as a buyer. All right. So that's where the for others comes in. I call it matchmaker. Brokers are ultimately, we're matchmakers. Yeah. We're the love doctors. We're bringing people together to do a transaction. If I own it, I'm not a broker. I'm selling my own property. If I'm buying it, I'm not a broker. I'm buying property for myself. But as a broker, think about what that term means. You're bringing 2 parties together. You're the love doctor. You're putting people together for a transaction, basically.
Yeah, no, that's a great comparison. We really are matchmakers.
We're matchmakers. We're love doctors.
And one thing I never understood is blue cheese stuffed olives. I don't.
Now I'm going to have nightmares about that because that's another thing that freaks me out. But yeah, I'm weird. And then you could also, this guy at the bottom, we could put the 2 olives back in the top, and then this little guy could sneak out the bottom. And that's one that people always overlook. And that's probably on the test too. They'll say, well, what about, let's say Jason's cousin lives in Asheville and Jason has an investment property that he wants to sell or lease out. Let's say he's going to lease it. Jason wants to lease out his investment property in Asheville, North Carolina, and Jason's cousin, Steve, lives there. Steve could help Jason to a certain extent, even though Steve may not be a broker, because if it's real property for others and there's no compensation involved, well, there's certain things Steve could do. Steve could maybe meet people at the house and let them in, not for sale, but for if it's a rental property, he can maybe let people in. They could maybe call Steve if something doesn't work, and he could provide some type of maintenance support. But the key is, and Jason will like this part the best, Jason cannot legally compensate Steve, right? Literally nothing. Jason can't get, not supposed to buy him dinner for that service, not supposed to pay him anything, not supposed to give him free anything. So if there's no compensation, you're what I call a volunteer. You're just a volunteer. And as long as you're not negotiating or anything like that, then there are some limited things you could do to volunteer and help a friend or family member.
Well, Rob, what about if my cousin just slides me $100 gift card?
Even that would be a little bit dangerous, right? We want to stay away from any compensation at all to unlicensed people. Unlicensed people, with an exception that we'll look at a little bit later, would be what we call party to the transaction, right? And so unless your cousin was somehow a party, a buyer, a seller, a renter, a landlord, something like that, if cuz is not involved in the transaction, then the only way a $100 gift card is going to work legally, sometimes people go 80 miles per hour on I-40. I'm not going to snitch on them, but legally, the only way we could give cuz a gift card is if he is actually a licensed, active, current real estate broker in North Carolina.
Got it. So it's pretty serious here. If I'm getting paid and assisting others with real property, that's one of the olives. Again, for others, that's when I need this license. That's what I'm doing in this class so that I can get paid to do these things in LL Beans, right?
That's right. And I've had people before be like, oh my gosh, I don't need to be in here because they only are taking this class because they like to buy property, fix it up, and resell it. And I'm like, if you're buying it, fixing it up, and reselling it, you own it. You don't need a broker's license to buy that property. You certainly don't need a broker's license to fix it up. And you don't need a broker's license to sell it. Now, there's still some advantages of having a broker license in that scenario because you could legally earn commissions for your own personal transactions. But if your goal is just to buy a house, fix it up, flip it, sell it, then you don't legally need a broker's license to do that.
So maybe we should take a moment now to pause and let people exit left for anyone that's like, oh,
hey, sure.
You just made my day.
If all you're planning to do is flip, I always jokingly, no one's ever actually got up and walked out when I said that, but I always jokingly say that to the class. I'm like, anyone needs to get up and, call it a day. There's back in the day, we had BurgerFi downstairs. I said, I recommend the BurgerFi or the Jersey Mike's downstairs. Grab a sandwich on your way home. So
yeah, we have had students go through the class all the way to the end and just not take the exam.
Yeah.
They're just to learn, some of the ins and outs, but not officially have the license. But like you said, there are benefits to having it, especially when it comes to the paid commission part. So,
Yep.
Well, that's
if you get one referral, your whole lifetime.
That's right. Yeah. Easy money with referrals.
You paid this class off and you got free education out of it. So
good point. Cool. Well, that's who needs a license. What about who doesn't need a license? I guess is the opposite, right?
Yeah. And there's unfortunately a kind of a list when it comes to who doesn't need a license. But here's the one that freaks people out, and I love it. But once upon a time, I had a superstar student in class named Danielle, and Danielle was already selling real estate to a certain extent. She was working for a new homes builder in the Triangle area. And she's sitting in class with us. And occasionally Danielle, being a superstar student, raise her hand, tell us about an example she saw with the house transaction. All her company did was sell new homes. And one day it occurred to someone, you're in this class and you already sell homes. How is that? And apparently, well, not apparently, what the rule is that what we call a business entity exemption. And you see that a lot with apartment communities. Pretty much just about everyone watching this has probably lived the apartment lifestyle at some point in their life, whether now or before, or when they were in college or whatever. First job, moved out of mom and dad's house, moved into an apartment, paradise. And so you notice those apartment communities don't generally have brokers running around. They don't have matchmakers usually. They have employees who lease those apartments out, right? And the same can be true. It's usually not, but it can be true that some new homes builders have the option, if they choose, of having employees sell their property and not use brokers. Occasionally I'll get someone in class like a Danielle who already works for a builder. And ironically, when they said, well, why are you taking this class? And they say, well, if you want to have a chance to work for because a lot of the new homes builders will require you to be licensed. She said, if you want to be able to pick and choose and work for what, in her opinion, were the best of the best communities, then it pays to have a broker's license, because that's a lot of times what they're looking for. Or if you want to work in residential resale or commercial sales, then you need to have a broker's license. But remember, you can be a W-2 employee of an apartment community, occasionally even of a builder, and not necessarily need a broker's license. The key, as I always say, is you're not allowed to be paid transaction-based compensation. So they cannot pay you bonuses based on how much you sell or how much you rent. You're just supposed to be a W-2 salaried employee for that company, and not required to have a license if a business is leasing or even selling their own real property. That's one example, one of several examples when you do not need a license.
Yeah, the new home community representative, or what we refer to as the builder's rep sometimes, definitely is a great example. Another one that often comes to mind is, and you have listed here on your presentation slide, folks who are leasing apartments, such as a leasing agent at an apartment community. Coming from the property management world, once upon a time, you and I both, that is, we worked with leasing agents, and
right, you trained probably thousands of them.
Trained them all, yes.
Trained them all. Leader of industry.
Yeah. But again, they are W-2 employees, as you mentioned. And so they are not necessarily responsible for having the North Carolina real estate broker's license, because they are an employee of a company renting out that property, their property. So that's another good example, but still doesn't hurt. We have actually a lot of folks who, like Danielle, who are working on site at a building community, or even apartment leasing agents who want to take their expertise to another level, perhaps, and earn that license. So that's where they come see us. But yeah, does not need one technically. And I like how you crossed out one of the olives there.
Yeah,
to represent
that's the blue cheese stuffed olive. We're getting rid of that.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
Wrap it in bacon, maybe. And what I like to call it too, the one thing I like to emphasize in my class is you don't need a license if you are exclusively selling or leasing what I call company product. Right. It's company product, right? It makes me feel like a good Northeasterner. It's product, right? We got product over here. And so if you're pushing company product, you're not representing Rob, Grant Meyer, Jason Morris, individuals. You're purely representing that corporate entity, that LLC entity, company product only. Then you don't. Now, that, like I said, and Danielle will back me on this, a lot of the really top builders in the area do want you to have a broker's license, probably because they do want to be able to compensate you based on closings rather than salary. You probably make quite a bit more upside financially to commissions than staying in that salary position. So there you have it.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier on, there's essentially a list. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, here's a list, right? Because there's some other stuff. And I had some good hands-on experience with really, I can combine the first one and the fourth one, attorney / trustee in a bankruptcy. I had a commercial tenant that we were trying to evict him. He found out we were about to evict him, and he filed for bankruptcy. We weren't the only people he owed money to. And I, not knowing any better, never been involved with a bankruptcy, I went to the hearing downtown Raleigh in the federal building. And so I was there about 2.5 hours before I realized I didn't actually need to be there. I was serving no purpose, but I got some good education out of it. And I saw a little bit about how the bankruptcy process works. And ultimately what you have is an attorney, a bankruptcy attorney, the trustee, sits up at the front of the room, and he calls the people up one at a time, either the entity or the person is filed for bankruptcy protection. And he kind of brings them up and asks them questions and, ask about their assets, because they declare certain assets. Some assets they're allowed to keep, some assets they basically relinquish. And then Mr. Trustee, the attorney, after he's satisfied that he's got the assets from them that he wants to sell or that he needs to sell, He then sells those assets, like their real estate, like some of their real estate, some of maybe their automobiles, some of their businesses, and he uses those funds to pay off their creditors. And so, and gets paid a really nice, fee for doing so. So that's a great example of an attorney who can sell real property belonging to others and get paid for it. But now that same attorney couldn't just all of a sudden show up on the weekend at an open house and be like, let me see if I can find some buyers here. No, that's not what he wants to do. It's not what he's legally allowed to do. But the law does say, listen, Mr. Attorney, in a bankruptcy scenario like that, has the right to sell property belonging to others because of that bankruptcy protection that they filed for. And of course, I found out what a friend of mine who used to work for a bankruptcy attorney, I found out how much money they make this past weekend. I'm not going to go into it, but let's just say he's paid handsomely for that, paid very well for it. So that attorney, and that's not all attorneys in other capacities, like an attorney working as a legal guardian, let's say for someone who's underage, who inherits property or something like that, or someone who's been a judge legally incompetent, and an attorney, court-appointed attorney, is appointed to look after that person's assets. Well, in those limited instances, that attorney would not need a broker's license, but very popular test question is, can that same attorney go out and list a house for sale on the side? Not unless they have a broker's license, and you do occasionally meet people who are attorneys as well as brokers, but the attorney does not need a broker's license as long as it falls with whatever they're doing, falls within the bounds of their legal practice.
Right. So the key is, the attorney is being paid by a client to do attorney stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes that attorney stuff involves real estate, right? But it's not actually it's not the sole purpose of why the attorney was hired, right? So the attorney has his or her own clients that are paying him or her to do attorney stuff, as I call it, and not necessarily the transactional sale, purchase of real estate for compensation for others, right? And so that's the distinguishing factor there, because I know a lot of attorney buddies, and if I didn't have my own license, my real estate license, I would think, oh, so I can just go talk to my buddy Chris Mann and he can represent me during the purchase, and then I just pay him the commission, right? And the answer is no. Actually, I can hire my attorney buddy to close that transaction, because as we'll talk about in a future video and in a future class, North Carolina is an attorney closing state, essentially. And so that would be where my buddy, the attorney, comes in at. But in terms of representing me as a buyer's agent, or like you said, listing his or her own home for sale. Now they could do that, right? They could be a FSBO, but what they can't do is receive a compensation for the sale of their home without that license, right? So yeah, definitely a test question to watch out for. They're going to probably give you two scenarios: one attorney that can and one attorney that can't, or one attorney that does need a license, one attorney that doesn't, and the actions that follow. So be sure to recognize that. I see here you've got other folks listed, such as the appraisers, the mortgage bankers and lenders.
2 and 3 tie in together nicely there. The appraiser and the mortgage banker / broker. It's what I like to call, they've got their own. They have their own license. They've got their own board. And so you don't need a broker's license to be a professional appraiser, right? What a professional appraiser does, without getting into too much detail, is they scientifically, mathematically formulate the market value of a piece of property. And to be able to do that for a fee legally, they have to get a North Carolina appraiser's license. Now, you do meet folks who have an appraiser's license and a broker's license, and there's a lot of consideration that has to go into that. For example, if I double dip and I have a broker's license and an appraiser's license, obviously I could not appraise a property for a transaction that I'm personally involved in. Say, for example, if I have a listing in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they go, hey, Rob, do you mind doing the appraisal? No, not at all. I'm going to appraise it and get as much money as possible. And so we kind of put the the wall between that. So it's two separate licenses. You need a broker's license to broker real estate transactions, and you need an appraiser's license to estimate the market value of a piece of real estate, essentially.
Thinking about getting that appraiser's license.
I thought about it too. I know
something about it would make me feel super badass.
Well, and you know, I was this close to doing it, and that because I thought all these agents I know, I'm hooked up with Better Homes and Garden, Paracle Realty. I got all these great contacts, and then it occurred to me, you know, who agents recommend is they recommend mortgage brokers and they recommend home inspectors, but oftentimes you don't get to pick your appraiser. The appraisers kind of gets dropped on you by the bank. Right. And so I was like, my sphere, I still want the appraiser's license, but I was like, my sphere of influence wouldn't help me as much with the appraiser as it would if you're a closing attorney, mortgage broker, or a home inspector. Those are services that your real estate broker will, buyer's agent, listing agent, whatever, oftentimes recommends those services, but doesn't hurt. I know a guy here locally that he's a commercial appraiser, and he's made a very good living doing it and enjoys it very much. So let me know how it goes, Jason. I might steal your idea.
No, I was hoping you'd go first. So.
All right. We might have to rock, paper, scissors for that and see. I've also thought about, speaking of, getting my mortgage broker license, because I've known some people who my first ever broker in charge from 22 years ago, he's transitioned to become a mortgage. I guess you technically qualify him as a mortgage banker, because he works for a company that lends their own money to home buyers. And he loves it. He's really good at it. He loves it. It's a good business for people who are like the numbers. They're good with numbers, but it's also sales involved. And it's a very much a sphere of influence. Those mortgage bankers, mortgage brokers, they're always visible in the real estate industry. They're coming to our sales meetings, coming to our office happy hours. And they do a lot of what my other buddy, Mike Sylvester, who does it, calls a lot of butt kissing. They need to do a lot of good butt kissing to hopefully earn business, right? Because they get paid typically based on how many loans they originate. And so but speaking of those mortgage bankers, mortgage brokers, they're matchmakers, but in a different way. They are not matchmaking buyers and sellers. They are matchmaking with buyers and the bank. And so it's a little bit different. And they do not need a North Carolina real estate broker's license. They obtain their own basically mortgage license to do that.
Yep. All right.
All right. We already hit trustee. The last two I'd say is the executor of a will, or someone who is a legal guardian for others. It's essentially, hey, you're not necessarily representing others at that point, because you have the legal authority to handle it yourself.
Right. Exactly. All right. So we know more about who needs it, who doesn't need it, who else doesn't need a license. When is a license?
Yeah, because I've warned you, it keeps on going. And a few of these are just a recap, so I'll go quick on them. The business entity selling or leasing their own property, the apartment community, the new homes builder. Then there's the auction company. I got this question a couple of times lately. People see it on practice tests. They're like, what is it with auction companies? Does the auctioneer need a broker's license? Do they not need a broker's license? What do they need? And it kind of depends on the question. Here's the breakdown. In order to auction property that belongs to others, real property belonging to others for compensation, then yes, a broker's license is required. And that could be the company itself. Let's say Morris Auction Sales, Morris Real Estate Auctions. Jason Morris is the broker in charge of that company, and he could absolutely auction off property, right? As long as he's also got an auctioneer's license. Now, Jason could hire someone to serve as the crier, the person banging the actual gavel at the auction. Does not need to be a broker, but behind that crier, some people call them, I think caller's a better name, but I've never been to an auction, so crier just freaks me out. I'm like, what are they actually, do they have to literally cry up there? Like, I don't know. And so Jason could be the behind the scenes, own the firm, broker in charge, qualifying broker, and then hire someone who's good with the gavel who's good with that crazy auction language, speaks auction language, and that person would need an auctioneer's license, but would not need a broker's license.
Yes, makes more sense now. And I would definitely have to hire that person. I could not.
Yeah, you don't probably not done too many auctions.
Hey, quick side note, Rob, for our audience who may not be aware, tell us about your method with the red arrows and the PT. What are you saying there?
Sure. So the PT just stands for problem topic. And it's something that folks who write real estate tests, people who write, basically real estate schools, have found to be problem areas for students on the exam. So as I said, twice within the last week, I've had people ask me that question about the auction process. Who needs a license? Who doesn't? So thanks. And then also down at the bottom, it shows you where these laws actually show up in the general statutes, the North Carolina general statutes. You don't have to necessarily memorize, well, what is rules 1 through 8? You don't need to remember that. We'll save that for our friends in law school. But that's where you could reference it if you wanted to go back and look at it.
Yes. And I'm glad you said that, because gosh, if we had to memorize the general statutes numbers and titles and all of that, yikes. However, every time
on another career,
once our audience goes out into the world with their license and they begin communicating with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, this is how the North Carolina Real Estate Commission talks. They talk in GS 93A-2. They will always make sure to give you that specific reference.
I admire that about them.
Right?
Top Gun at the Real Estate Commission do that on purpose, because they're not telling you their opinion. They're referring you to a law that says it's the way it is. This is what our legislators voted on, or a rule that the Real Estate Commission voted on. And that's why it is the way it is. It's not just because I told you so, right? It's because that's the law, is what they're essentially saying.
Right. Exactly. All right. So PT, problem topic, special area of emphasis that has been shown to be problematic on tests. Is that
You
fair?
got it. Problem topic. Yes, sir.
All right. Cool. So watch out for those. Not that the other information that you're not pointing to is insignificant, right? It's not that. It's just what we're seeing is some commonly missed areas on tests we have seen lately are these areas you're pointing to. All right. Yes. Let's talk about unlicensed salaried employees. We have that coming up, right?
Yeah, we do. Let's kick it off with that. So I actually started out, my first job was for a real estate agent, and I got my license pretty soon after I went to work with her, and she hired me to be basically an assistant. And with that, I did a lot of stuff. I took pictures of her listings. I made flyers for her listings. I put in real estate signs, just general gopher task, administrative gopher. And all that's great. I didn't need a license to do it. Now, she was the happiest person. Other than me, she was the happiest person around when I got my license, because that meant I could now do open houses and I could show property, and actually sold the first house I ever showed. How about that? And I was like, this is going to be easy, just do about 200 more of these houses and I'll retire. And so, but not everyone sells the first house that you show. And so I, of course, could not show it. I could not show property until I was licensed. As you can see from the top of the list there, may not show real property for sale, but you can do quite a few other things as an unlicensed salaried employee.
Yeah. So taking it back to that example I was giving about the leasing agent, right? They're an unlicensed employee. So I like how you specify here on your slide that you may not show real property that is for sale. But again, if you're a leasing agent at a rental community and showing properties to prospective tenants, that is certainly allowed as an unlicensed employee. Negotiate, you've got that underlined. You could probably even underline it even one more time, just to significant, just to share the significance of that.
No negotiating without a license. Even that apartment employee, even that new homes developer employee, they're employees, they're not paid commission. They're still not supposed to negotiate. Negotiation can only be done with the individual who owns the property or to a certain extent, a broker may be able to negotiate, a broker may be able to negotiate on behalf of their client, but unlicensed employees, no negotiation, no way, never.
Yeah, and so this is an area that in the real practice, the real world of real estate, like you said, your first job was an unlicensed assistant, and that is very, very common for high producing real estate agents, especially residential real estate agents. They'll hire an assistant to help do some of these tasks that are allowed without a license. But then you eventually went on to earn your license, which opened up doors for more things that you could do. But still, let's talk about this is what unlicensed assistants can't do. What can they do other than what you gave us some examples of?
Yeah. And the last bit I would just add before we go to can do is also don't offer opinions, advice, explanations. So for example, unlicensed person, if I'm, I get a phone call to the office and they say, hey, I see this property is actually got a call one time from a guy asking me about a property in Delco. And I was like, what's a Delco? Never heard of it. And I was at Wrightsville Beach and this guy was asking about a property that was an hour south of us out in the country. I was like, don't know Delco, friend, sorry. And he's asking me about this property. Well, the thing is, as an unlicensed person, I could tell him, if I'm able to find out what it is, I could tell him the price. I could tell them the public information. Like if I've got a flyer in front of me that says 50 acres in Delco listed for $200,000, it's 50 acres, etc. I could read him what I have in front of me, which was a broker prepared flyer, but I'm not. And if that same gentleman says, well, how does that price compare with other properties in Delco? I'd be like, sir, you need to speak to the broker. You need to speak to someone who knows where Delco is, right, first and foremost. But also as an unlicensed person, I cannot give you advice. I cannot explain things. I cannot interpret stuff. And so you could, to a certain extent, answer the phone and quote a price, but even that is very limited because we don't want unlicensed people communicating with potential homeowners, et cetera. So you could regurgitate, as I like to say, what's public information, but you cannot negotiate and you cannot offer an opinion.
Yeah. Tricky slope there. Don't get caught up in that.
It is. And I'll be the first to tell you, it is just like people tend to go 80 miles per hour on I-40. I've seen unlicensed employees doing things they're not supposed to do. I'm not a snitcher by nature, but remember, and that's one thing I always try to point out, because a lot of times people taking this class, maybe even you watching this video, you're like, well, I work for such and such realty right now, and I do open houses all the time, and I don't have my license. And I'm like, well, you're not supposed to. So keep in mind on the test, you need to follow the laws, not what a real estate agent may have told you once upon a time. Maybe you thought you heard them say this, or you thought you heard them say that. Focus on what you read in the book, especially what you read in the Appendix A and what you hear from real estate instructors, because we're well versed on the laws rather than what may or may not go on out there in private practice.
Right. Do as we say, not as we do.
Exactly. And me and Chip can always do it right. So
not that you and I do that either.
We can't afford for as a real estate, as broker in charge is, and real estate instructors, and Jason's the director of a school, it'd be pretty daggum embarrassing for us to get popped for a disciplinary action. So right. I'll leave that up to some of my colleagues out there.
I don't even go 80 on the highway, sir.
You don't go 80.
I don't. I am a rule follower. Remember, I am a C on the
there you go. Hill. Definitely. I don't blame you. All right. So what can our unlicensed friends do? Like, let's throw them a bone here.
Yeah. What can we do?
They can. And this first one's always been confusing to me. They can type, fill in the blanks of offers, leases, and other documents. Here's the way I tell this story. I met my wife at Prudential Carolina Real Estate. I was already licensed by then. And I literally was bringing her a handwritten, scratched out agency agreement, because this was 22 years ago. And a lot of, believe it or not, real estate agents, we had agents back then who didn't even use a computer. Most of them did. And so one of the services Prudential offered was we had an admin person who could do data entry and who could also type up agreements. So if I filled in an agreement in Chicken Scratch, I could then basically give it to the admin person, who's kind of like, we don't use the word secretary anymore. It's probably that retired in like the 70s, but they're kind of like a secretary who can type stuff up and make it look clean and good. But I wouldn't say that an unlicensed person, they should not be sitting down and filling in an agency agreement with a client or an offer to purchase. We're not asking them to do that. We're just saying they can maybe type up the handwritten version that I've done just to make it look clean, administrative type work, that type of thing. You see, they say broker prepared drafts.
Right. Clean up your mess. Yes.
Clean up my mess. I need it. And so I ended up marrying that lady, and she's 22 years later, she's still helping to keep me tight. So
she's still cleaning up your mess.
she's a better typist, and she's a excellent, too good of a proofreader. I can't give her stuff to proofread because she'll never approve it. So, and so property management, that's the other thing. I've worked in property management, and you can have unlicensed people. There's a lot of unlicensed people in the property management industry. All right. And what they do a lot of is sometimes they can show rental units, only rental units, if they work for a property management company. All right. You can't manage property without a license. But if I start my own property management company, call it Rob's Property Management, and I want to hire a couple college kids to work as my unlicensed employees, they could show rental property. Yeah. All right. They could, I've always been a little foggy on what we mean by pre-printed lease forms. I would rather have the unlicensed person, again, type it up. But that's kind of the way I would go with it there. And then the last one is data entry, place advertising. My wife transitioned she's never had a broker's license, doesn't want one. And she transitioned from admin to advertising coordinator for Prudential. And that was her job. Her job was to place advertising for about 300 different agents in the newspaper, in the magazines, all that good stuff. And that's fine. She's not the one writing the information. She's not the one writing what we used to call the ad copy or the remarks, beautiful 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2,100 square feet. The broker writes that information, they put it in print, and then you can have an employee of the company potentially place that advertising in the different websites, different stuff like that.
Or back then, newspapers, Rob.
Back then, I know. It's like people like, the Wilmington Star News. That bought us a lot of groceries, was the Wilmington Star News. We recently saw, my wife found one about 6 months ago, and it was like 4 pages. The Star News real estate showcase is now about 4 pages. It used to be 200 something pages. So,
oh, wow.
Changing world. Yeah. I'm just glad to know it's still out there. So
yes, it is.
All right. So we got our first quiz question here.
Fantastic. I'm ready. Let's see. It's a true or false. So 50-50 chance here.
I like true or false. Yeah, I got a better shot. And so I'm going to read it and let everyone who's maybe watching this think about it for a second. Unlicensed property owner, true or false, may compensate an unlicensed person to show rental property and collect rent on their behalf, as long as the unlicensed person does not negotiate on behalf of the owner. So this is one I wrote fairly recently. It's meant to be a headbanger. So think about it for a sec. Reread it for a sec before you answer. And I don't mean Jason answer, because I'm not trying to stump Jason, but I'm thinking people out there in Zoom land, think about it for a sec, because I see a distractor in here that might potentially throw off your answer. So I'll pause for a sec and let you contemplate. All right, so let's first critique it. Let's really break this down. That's one of the things you get good at. The more of these you take, you start really breaking down the language and kind of diagram the sentence. An unlicensed property owner may compensate an unlicensed person to show rental property and collect rent on their behalf. So if I stop right there, that's a bit of a distractor, because we know you don't need a license to show rental property, and may not even need a license to collect rent. But that would be the case if you work for a property management company, right? If you work for Seacoast Rentals, or you work for Wilson Property Management or Rhine Property Management in the Triangle, those entities, those companies can hire unlicensed people because those companies have a firm license, they have a broker in charge, they can hire unlicensed people. But we're talking about Bob from down the street, neighbor Bob. Could he hire an unlicensed college kid or an unlicensed retiree to show rental property and collect rent? No, even though the unlicensed person does not negotiate on behalf of the owner. So we're going to say this one is false. If you are compensated to manage property for others, you must be licensed, right? And so if you're going to receive compensation to show that property and it belongs to someone else, then you must have a broker's license, or potentially be, as we said, a unlicensed assistant. So if you work for a property management company, but somebody's got to have a license. If you're managing property for compensation that you don't own, somebody, either you or your boss, has to have a license. This just can't be neighbor Bob down the street hiring a college kid to be their property manager. It probably happens out there in the real scary world, but they're not supposed to, right? We're not supposed to go like this. You're only supposed to receive that compensation to manage property for others if you are in fact licensed.
So what are some lessons learned from the way this question is written, Rob? I mean, this is the first of a few questions that we're going to be presenting on throughout our video series. But one of the major skills, if you will, to perfect while you are taking the broker pre-licensing course is to learn how to test, to learn how to read these questions, to learn how to what I call dissect the questions, look for the distractors, as you call them, or red flags. So what are some of the things, again, we learned from this question?
Well, I would say be careful with the what I call the cheese. The cheese would be, oh, I'm unlicensed. You can show rental property without a license. I'm like, yes. And
run with it. Run with it, right?
Run with it. They grab the cheese and go, right? And they even threw another. They put some barbecue sauce on it too. They said, you're not negotiating. And you're like, it's rental property, so I can show it, and I'm not negotiating. I'm good here. But the problem is, who is hiring whom, right? It's an unlicensed. It's Bob from down the street hiring a college kid. College kid's not licensed. Bob's not licensed, right? And so Bob, the neighbor, can't hire Susie, the college kid from UNCW down the road, right? That's illegal. One of them needs a broker's license. And by the way, if Bob had a broker's license, right, then, and he was hiring an unlicensed person, then even in that scenario, there's some very specific things we'd have to follow, right, such as the unlicensed person would have to be an employee rather than an independent contractor, could not be paid commission, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. Great. All right. Well, so we'll have other opportunities throughout our series here to dissect some of these questions and learn from them. But yeah.
If you like cheese, we'll see a lot of it. There's a lot of cheese out, and I do love cheese. So
yes.
I was like this because this takes me back. I'm old enough that I started out as a salesperson. I was a North Carolina salesperson. Back in 2000, you could obtain either a salesperson license or a broker license. Oh. And I, like everyone else watching this video, and I can speak for Jason too, I was like, which one's easier? They're like, salesperson. I said, that's what I'll have. Give me that one. I think it was 110 question salesperson and another 30 question exam to be a broker. So some people, in fact, my colleagues were like, go ahead and get broker now. I'm like, I just graduated college 3 months ago, barely graduated college. Let's take this in baby steps. And so I passed salesperson license. And up until I think it was about 03, you could either be a salesperson, which was like sort of the equivalent of a provisional broker. It was a little more permanent than that. You could stay a salesperson your whole career, but as a salesperson, you had to be supervised by a broker in charge, right? And so as a salesperson, you could sell houses, you could work with buyers, work for sellers, but only with the supervision of a broker in charge. And so if you did that extra 30 questions in those days, congrats, you're now a broker. And in those days, once you were a broker, you could either manage an office as a broker in charge, or you could be a broker sole proprietor, which means work completely independently on your own. So I got lucky. I never had to take the actual broker license quiz because in 2006, I think it was, they introduced a class you could take, which was like the modern day post-license class, called it broker transition course. And they required all salespersons to take the course. And if you didn't take the course, then you were they took your license away. So I took the broker transition course and have had a broker license ever since. Nowadays, there's no longer a salesperson license in North Carolina. There are in some states. I believe California, for example, is a state where you can have a salesperson license, but everyone in North Carolina who has a real estate license nowadays actually does have a broker license. And I say this in class all the time, so you might have heard me say it. All your loved ones, all your family, your mom, your dad, your best friend, everybody's going to say it wrong. Because here's what they're going to say, Jason. They're going to say, hey, Jason, you got a realtor license, don't you? And you're being a nice person. You're going to kind of nod your head. But you don't. You don't have a realtor license. You have a broker license, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's another really huge misconception. And it's one that, as you are alluding to, we have to decide whether we're going to pick that battle or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, Rob, you're wrong. They don't say that. They say, oh, you've got a realtor license. So there's two issues. There's two issues here. The pronunciation of realtor, which again is realtor, not realtor. So go tell your family, friends, and everyone you know. But also, a realtor status is separate from your license. It has nothing to do with your license. Although, I was going to say, although you need a license, actually, you don't need a license to be a realtor. Right. More on that to come. But Rob, you're telling us your history, back when the dinosaurs walked the earth, and you got our audience and our students probably psyched up about the opportunity of choosing the easier one. And now they don't get to choose an easier one. There's only one. So what we're getting at here, guys, is that in the state of North Carolina, as of 2022, the year 2022, they're only issuing one license, and that is a broker's license. But as you are exploring other resources in your studies, you may again see, like Rob said, California. I know South Carolina is another one that uses terms like salesperson's license, or they'll use a broker in charge license. We're different here in North Carolina. Broker in charge, as we'll discuss soon, is a status, but it's not a type of license. And so distinguishing, again, the differences between license and the status of license is going to be important to you. In fact, this may look very familiar to much of our audience, especially if you're our students currently, because this was a big question on one of your very first assignments, and that was in the Relink assignment that you had the first week of your course. And it asked you how many types of licenses are there, and then it also asked you how many types of statuses are there. And so that's what we're getting into now. Again, biggest takeaway right now is that North Carolina specific issues one type of license. It's the broker license. There'll be several different statuses, as you'll see there, that we're going to cover more in depth. But we are, again, a broker state versus a salesperson state or a broker associate state, et cetera. So kind of be mindful of that, especially, again, when you're looking at resources that contain national content that all licensees need to know, be aware of, and responsible for. They may use different words for the meaning of others, such as what Rob's got here, the synonyms. So this is a good time to remind folks of the synonyms, or what I call the AKAs, also known as. But whenever you are tested, you are in North Carolina as a broker licensed state. I want to touch on the statuses or categories sometimes, as we refer to those, Rob.
Sure. And just add one little thing there.
Please.
You covered it very well. I would just echo that realtor is basically it's a trade organization. It's a membership. And so not all brokers are realtors, right? Some brokers are, some are not. If you exclusively work in new home sales, you may not need a realtor membership, because if you're only selling, company-owned product, even though you may be licensed, you may not need that realtor membership. When I was a vacation rental manager and all I did was manage about 150 vacation rentals, didn't need a realtor membership because we did not use the multiple listing service. There was not really a benefit to being a realtor at that time. And so it is a membership to a great national, I think international at this point. There's the National Association of Realtors, but I believe they're in other countries as well. And so that's a membership you may or may not, if you join a firm like Better Homes and Garden or Coldwell Banker or someone like that, and you do residential general brokerage, then you're almost assuredly going to be a realtor. But you may start out in your career doing something else and not immediately seek that realtor membership. And if we're talking statuses, we know where you start out. I always like to say, hey, what's day one look like, right? What's day one look like? When you actually receive your broker's license, you'll have what's called an inactive provisional broker license. Inactive meaning that you're not yet ready to use it, because as a provisional broker, you'll need supervision. So as an inactive provisional broker, assuming you want to go right to work, the first thing you'll need to do is locate a broker in charge. And that broker in charge can, with their help, you can change from inactive to active. But that still leaves the provisional broker. I kind of call it the training wheels. It's the training wheels of brokerage. And you'll stay a provisional broker until you complete 90 hours of post-licensing education, all conveniently taught by your friends here at the Go School of Real Estate. We love teaching it. We just had a class test last night, did great. And so there's a common misconception, especially back before they shortened the period to 18 months. It used to be 3 years. And I would always trick students with, how long are you a provisional broker for? And they would almost always say, it's 3 years, right? It's a 3-year apprenticeship. It's a 3-year training wheels. Not exactly. No. It never was 3 years. 3 years was how long you had to complete your education before they put you on inactive, right? Now they've shortened it to half that amount. It's 18 months, but you don't have to wait 18 months. You could, let's say I got my license on March 1st. I could complete all my post-licensing by the end of March. By April 1st, I am a non-provisional broker, right? So provisional is the training wheel, so to speak. It has a few limitations. You can still make plenty of money as a provisional broker, but you'll want to you're required to complete your 18 hours, not 18 hours, your 90 hours of post-licensing within 18 months of when you actually receive your license. Anything you want to add to that, Jason?
I'm just sitting here thinking, if I were someone that was taking your class or my class or what have you, and now you're already telling me I got more education to do.
Great. So, hey, at least you get to come back and hang out with us.
That's right.
And so, and people are always like, well, when should I do it? At the beginning? Should I wait? And generally your broker in charge, when you join a firm, they'll probably want you to do the post-licensing education sooner than later, because it's better for the firm. It's less liability for the firm, but also it's better for you probably, because you generally, as a general broker working in residential resale, the longer you're in it, the busier you're going to get, the bigger your sphere of influence is going to be. And so if you're getting to the 1 year mark, you've got all these buyers lined up, you're wanting to show property 6 days a week, because that's how you make money, is showing property, for example. And then you got to kind of go to the bench and sit in class for 30 hours. It's probably better to do it sooner than later. And so that's what a lot of firms will recommend, but you're welcome to wait and do it towards the middle or towards the end of your 18-month period there.
Yeah. we're going to hit on that a little bit more coming up as well, as far as provisional broker and what they have to do to drop that provisional status. I'd say too that we also speak in acronyms, as you guys perhaps already know. So you may hear us refer as a provisional broker as a PB, simply the initials of provisional broker. But yeah, provisional broker is what you will come out of the gate with after completing not only this course, but also going on to pass the state licensing exam. They will issue your license on inactive status as a provisional broker. Let's dive a little deeper, Rob, into provisional broker status. What do you got next?
Sure. And so provisional broker status, obviously you've completed your 75-hour class and passed your state exam. You'll then need to complete your 90 additional hours of post-license education. Here's how they break down: 3 30-hour classes within 18 months of receiving. A nice thing to watch out for is that within 18 months of activating my license? Not exactly. It's actually within 18 months of receiving your license, because some people don't even activate their license until they're no longer provisional. So it's within 18 months of what I call license issuance, or within receiving your license from the Real Estate Commission. And then here are the 3 classes. We teach all 3 of them. They are called Post-Licensing 301, 302, 303. I don't see a lot of test questions about the specific names of the classes, the specific content. I'm not saying it's impossible that you'll never see one, but that's what they are. They are 30 hours each. There is a test. That's the other question we get a lot. Is there a test? There is a test at the end of each one of those. But I'd say the majority of students usually pass those tests because they have obviously passed the licensing exam, and these are shorter tests. You can complete all 3 courses immediately upon license issuance if you want, right? We've seen people complete all 3 of these within a month. We've seen some people take the full 18 months. There's not really a wrong way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I went ahead and knocked all of mine out because there was an incentive to do so with the firm that I was affiliating with. And then also too, I was already in study mode, and I had already gone through the pre-licensing course. I didn't want to forget again how to study and do homework and commit to a schedule of showing up to class and all that. So that's some reasons why I did mine. But also to reiterate, these 3 post-licensing courses really are just a deeper dive into some of the, or all of the content, some of the content that you're going to be covering here in the pre-licensing course. So you can imagine, when you talk about in the pre-licensing course, contracts and closings, there's going to be a post-licensing course after you are licensed that will take an even deeper dive into that content, specifically on much of the contracts, contract law and closings and things like that. So that's another reason why most students do really well in post-licensing and pass those examinations, because it's, again, just a reiteration, if not taking it to the next level of some of the content that you just learned in pre-licensing. So nothing to fret.
Yep, absolutely right. I always say this is kind of a front-loaded process.
Yeah.
The hardest part is the PSI, the class and the PSI exam. From there, not to say the job gets easier, because working with buyers and sellers is by no means easy. But as far as the testing and the amount of education, it's very front-loaded as you go along there.
Yeah, and a little note of caution here too. Rob mentioned earlier in previous days, not that long ago, the time limit was 3 years. And so now you see here, we're pointing to 18 months. And so that's a relatively recent change. So if you are reading other materials, including your textbook, and it still says 3 years complete, it even had an additional caveat of 3 years, but you have to at least complete one by the anniversary of your first year.
The anniversary date. Yeah.
The anniversary day. Again, if you're reading that material, again, know that has changed. The key number here now is still the same 3 classes, 30 hours each class, but 18 is your key number there, 18 months of your anniversary date. Good point too, by the way, Rob, on it's not the date that you activate your license. It's the date essentially that is on your license that they send you. Basically, I tell students is the date you pass the exam. even though the real estate commission will issue your license maybe a couple of days after that, but still go by the date you pass the exam. That will certainly be a date you remember. So that is your anniversary date, and you'll want to have all of your post-licensing completed within that 18 months of that date.
You got it.
What else do we need to know about provisional broker or PB status?
PB status. All right. So the real estate commission, we love them. Well, I really do. And they're good about answering their phone. You know, it's one of the few places you call where you don't get an automated interactive voice recording. And they're like, please listen carefully to the next 75 options. They don't do that. Usually you call and you get to talk to somebody. But at the same time, they don't want to be getting, you know, unnecessary calls. And so one of the things they want you to know is what happens once you finish your post-licensing. Once I finish my post-licensing as a student, do I need to call the real estate commission? Do I need to email them? Do I need to drive over to Raleigh and go talk to them? No, none of that. Because once you finish your 90 hours, what will happen is Jason or Kelsey, who works with Jason, if you take it with us, will submit your successful completion to the real estate commission. And once you do that for the third class and you've successfully completed your 90th hour, your provisional status will be automatically removed. Not as in that like it vanishes immediately, but you will receive an updated pocket card from the real estate commission. I'll show you what a pocket card looks like real quick. I'm sure you've seen one before, but this is
actually in your pocket, Rob?
It used to be. For a while, I laminated it. I laminated it and carried it. And so now this is a pocket card. It's got my license number. It's got my expiration date. And it's got B, which I'm always been a little miffed that they don't call me a BIC, right? I'm like, but I'm a BIC. But you never get one that says BIC. It only says either PB when you're provisional. Once you complete that 90th hour, the P goes away and you're now just like me, you're a B. You're me with a much higher license number. And your expiration date, if you get your license in the next 4 months, will be the same as mine. And you know what's not on here, interestingly, is there's nothing on here about active or inactive. You can't tell by looking at someone's pocket card whether they're active or not. All you know is, did they pay the renewal fee? Are they a provisional broker, or are they a broker? And of course, what's their license number, et cetera. So that's the old pocket card. It'll probably show up again later, but good to have it.
Your license starts with a 1? Jeez.
I know, it's crazy, right? I've got some family members who are like 5-digit license numbers. And so it's pretty exciting. Provisional. I got mine when I was in middle school. So provisional brokers and their BICs are subject to disciplinary action for any violations the PB makes. We go into more detail on that in post-licensing 303. But while you are provisional, if you get a complaint filed against you, then your BIC will automatically be what's called a co-complainant. So if you get a disciplinary action or a brown envelope, your BIC's going to get a brown envelope. If you were called to Raleigh for a hearing and you are perhaps reprimanded by the real estate commission, your BIC could be subject to that disciplinary action as well. So that's a nice incentive why the companies that you're going to work for would rather you be a full broker rather than a provisional broker, you know, within a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, we're going to dive deeper into, BICs and their role and the status and responsibilities of a BIC status, I should say, and in an upcoming segment. But that's one thing, again, that provision. I think we should underline the word there, provisional too. Provisional brokers. Those are the folks that are highly supervised by their broker in charge. And if you get in trouble, so do they. So they're responsible for not letting you get in trouble.
And as both broker in charges, we can relate to that. We don't want you to get in trouble. And we also don't want to get in trouble with you.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about provisional broker status.
Absolutely. Now, here's a big one. You cannot operate independently as a provisional broker because you have to be supervised. But you can also not dual affiliate with an asterisk. It used to be provisional brokers can never, ever, ever dual affiliate, and they still cannot to a certain extent. Let's say Jason, of course, is affiliated with a Raleigh area firm. He also likes to spend a lot of time in Morehead City. Could he dual affiliate now with a Morehead firm and a Raleigh firm? He could, because he is no longer a provisional broker. But while you are provisional, that would be impossible. You could not affiliate with two separate firms in two separate towns, because that's not allowed. The Real Estate Commission says you need to be supervised by one BIC while you are provisional.
Yeah. And this is a huge point right here too, Rob. The first part of what you said, may not operate independently. That's a big shocker to a lot of our students and perhaps our audience watching now. So what I hear you saying there is that once I get my license, I can't immediately go out and open Morris Realty.
That's correct.
And
not immediately. That breaks a lot of hearts, because a lot of people are like, what do you mean I don't get to keep 100% of the money? What do you mean I can't open Morris Realty? Not yet, because at least while you're provisional, and probably for a little while after that, you're going to need to be supervised by a broker in charge. Doesn't necessarily have to be a firm, but you do have to have a broker in charge. For most people, that is joining a firm. For most people, that is joining Better Homes and Garden, Paracle Realty, or whomever. But technically, while you're provisional, you just need a broker in charge, an active current broker in charge, to serve as your supervisor.
Okay, well, I'll just go out and become one of those broker in charges. How about that?
You can. That's the good news. You can. You just need you need a little bit of experience, and you've got to have a little bit further education before you do. So
yeah. So remember, guys, this is like the training wheels that Rob was referring to, and there's a benefit to it. It may seem like a frustration to some, especially when you think, oh, I'm going to get a license, I can start my own business. Well, yeah, you can start your own business, but it's got to be affiliated underneath, an already established business that has a broker in charge position that can supervise you for that significant, or for that period of time while you are a provisional broker, especially. So we're going to talk about some of the steps of becoming a BIC. But again, for those who are out there thinking, once I get my license, right after I pass that state license exam, I'm going to open up my own brokerage and start working for myself. In North Carolina, it doesn't work like that. And it's a good thing, because what I like to tell students, Rob, and I'm sure you do as well, we're not teaching you everything there is to know. Boy, we would be in class a lot longer than 75, 85 hours, right? They are just getting a foundation amount in order to be successful in testing. But when you finish your pre-licensing course and even your post-licensing course, and you start working for a firm and affiliating with a firm, that's when you really learn even more, real world application of this information, and even then some. So you will definitely want to be supervised for a period of time before you strike out on your own.
Very good point. Yep. And as far as the compensation goes, you cannot just any old person can pay you what I call real estate compensation. While you're provisional broker, you could drive for Uber on the side. You could, wait tables. You could work for NC State, be a professional baseball player, whatever. But if we were talking about commissions, if we're talking about referral fees, while you're provisional, you must be compensated by your supervising broker. Now, that actually applies to all affiliated brokers now, but it's always been the case and always will be the case that provisional brokers must be compensated specifically by their broker in charge, their supervising broker. And as we mentioned a second ago, these last two are a bit redundant. We know that once you receive your license, it'll be inactive. It'll be activated by your broker in charge when you find one. And completion of your 90 hours will automatically remove the provisional status. They don't want you to feel like you have to drive to Raleigh and talk to them. Leave it to Jason and Kelsey. Once you finish your third class, they'll report it, and perfect. And they'll report it, and then that'll automatically remove the provisional. Perfect. All right. So be aware. This is, by the way, this is a nice note that the real estate commission put in the commission put it in their most recent syllabus and I actually reached out to one of my students who had done all his post licensing, but has not yet activated his license. And I said, hey, just so you know, these post licensing courses are only valid for 2 years from the date of completion. So if you're passing your PSI exam, you say, I'll go ahead and knock out all 90 hours and then not use my license for the next 5 years. That may not be the best plan, right? I'm going to say, once you take your post licensing, you want to go ahead and activate your license within that 2-year window, because if you got your license on March 1st, finished all your post licensing by May 1st, and then did not activate your license for the next 5 years, there's a good chance, unless they change the rules in 5 years, that you're going to have to go back and retake all that post licensing. So that credit is good for 2 years. Make sure that you do it within 18 months of license issuance, and then make sure that you activate your license within that 2 years of completing your post licensing.
Would this rule apply, or this note from them apply to in a scenario where I took, let's say, 1 out of 3 post-licensing courses, then life happened and I stopped taking post-licensing courses and in fact missed my 18-month deadline to finish all 3. Fast forward 3 years later, I'm ready to get back into real estate. I've kept my license current, but I again have not met my post-licensing education requirement. What does this rule mean for that, if anything?
It sounds to me, and I could be wrong, all right, I'd have to check with the school director, pro, to know for sure. But my hunch is that because you waited more than 2 years, I don't think they're going to count the one that you took more than 2 years ago. And probably for good reason, because the information changes. They redo those syllabus for these post-licensing classes change every year. And so if it's been 3 years since you took post-licensing 301, I don't think they're going to count it at that point. They're going to say, bro, I think they're going to make you go back and you're going to have to take all 3 before you can. Well, yeah, you're going to have to at least, I don't know. I think you're going to have to take all 3 before you activate your license if it's been that long. Yeah.
So when you resurface and decide, I'm going to pick up where I left off, the real estate commission may have another plan for you, depending on how long ago you finished that 1 or 2 courses and think that you only have 1 or maybe 2 more left to go. That might not be the case. So yeah, I guess
they're picky about that, and for good reason. Like I said, the information changes, the rules change, and we're not teaching the same stuff in post-licensing 301 or 302 that we did 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So it's a good idea that they say, look, if it's been that long, you got to come back and redo it.
Yeah.
And those classes aren't free, luckily for me and Jason, because but they are not free. So I say, go ahead, take them all, get them done, activate your license, keep your license active, keep your license current. That's the best way to not get sent to the back of the line.
Exactly.
All right, here's another one. All right, a provisional broker shall be supervised by only 1 broker in charge. This is the exception. This is a sneaky one that a lot of people don't know about. This rule snuck in July of 2021. I was actually on a Zoom class with an attorney from the Real Estate Commission, and they asked this question, and I was like, no, you can't do that. And they were like, yes, you can. The law changed July 1st. A provisional broker used to be, provisional brokers are 1 BIC, and that's it. You can never have more than 1 BIC if you were provisional. Now that's changed slightly. Provisional brokers shall be supervised by only 1 broker in charge at a time, except, there's our favorite word, except that a provisional broker may be supervised by no more than 2 brokers in charge of 2 licensed affiliated firms located in the same physical location and acting as a co-listing or co-selling agents in real estate transactions. So here's what that.
All right, Rob. All right, you got to break that down for us.
I got to break that down.
Give us a scenario.
That hurt me to read it. I was like, there's probably no one left awake out there. Everyone turned it off. And so here's what that means. Let's say there's Team Morris of Better Homes and Garden Paracle Realty. Team Morris, all right. what that means is you now, as a provisional broker, you could affiliate with Team Morris and with Better Homes and Garden Paracle Realty, but only because Team Morris is led by Jason Morris, broker in charge of that team, and he's affiliated, he's part of the Better Homes and Garden Paracle office. And Jason, the broker in charge of Team Morris, and I'm going to guess it might be Brandy Taylor, broker in charge of the Paracle office, are under the same roof. They literally have to be in the same physical location. So as a provisional broker, you could be on Team Morris and part of Paracle Realty, but you could not be with Paracle Realty in Cary and then go join another firm in another town or even another location in the same town. They have to be under the same roof.
Gotcha. And again, that's for provisional brokers. So
correct. That's
provisional
right.
brokers, the only time they may have two BICs basically supervising them is when both of those BICs are within the same office structure. They're in the same area. They're in the same housing, essentially, right?
Yeah. And then the lawyer got me twice. They got me twice because they were like, what if they're in the same building, but one is in 419B and one is in 419A. I was like, well, that's probably fine. They're like, nope, again, you're wrong. They're like, they got to be in the same physical location, the same mailing address, right? And so Jason is at the Better Homes and Garden Paracle Realty office over there in Regency Park, the Regency high rise. Brandy's in that same office location. You could, as a PB, dual affiliate with both of them, but that rule's only about 8 months old. So
yeah,
it's hot off the press.
Yeah. And what we want you guys to really take away from this is that most cases you cannot dual affiliate except for this new rule here. And just think the bigger thing to think about, I think, or the better example is just remember, I, as a provisional broker, could not dual affiliate with a firm here where I currently live and a firm in the mountains, because I'm a provisional broker, and that's two different BICs that I'm going to have, and they're in two different physical geographical locations. Can't happen.
Yep. All right. Here's a review. A provisional broker who does not complete the required 90 hours of post-licensing education within 18 months of licensure will have and what? So now I got you a multiple choice. You got a 25% chance. Let's see. I'm going to pause for a sec. Think about it. All right. I'm going to say, what I always like to tell people is anytime you're talking about an education blip, if you don't do your education, it's always active or inactive, right? And so if you do not do your post-licensing within the 18 months, you'll have an inactive license, right? If you, in the future, we'll also talk about continuing education. Failure to do continuing education could result in an inactive license. But I always tell people, draw a line between education and inactive, because if you fail to do the education, you go inactive. Expired license, that's another category for when you don't pay your renewal fee. And there's not really very many scenarios where you'd ever see a canceled license or a terminated license. You could have a revoked license, you could have a suspended license, expired, inactive. So keep an eye on that. And it's pretty frequent that you'll see questions about what action or lack of action causes inactive or expired.
Now, Rob, what are you going to say to those students who are pondering what you said earlier about, well, I'm going to be issued a license when I first pass the licensing exam. I'm going to be issued a license that's on inactive status. So what's the difference between that inactive status and what you're talking about here? Does that make sense?
Sure. So inactive, there's really two things that could cause it. Inactive could be either once you activate your license, to go inactive would likely be due to an education lapse. Also, while you're provisional, while you're just starting out, you would be inactive if you're not supervised by a broker in charge. So while you're provisional, if you do not have the supervision of a broker in charge, you're automatically inactive. Once you get to the 18-month point, if you've not done your post-licensing, you're going to go inactive. Once you're a full-blown broker and you're supposed to take your continuing education each year, failure to do so would make you inactive.
Got it. So to activate, as you said, and I think we're going to dive deeper into this a little later, but to activate my license, I've got to get a BIC. I've got to be under a BIC. I've got to affiliate, as we say in the business, affiliate with a real estate firm that has a broker in charge. And then I am active through that process. And then if I ever miss out on an educational requirement, a deadline, such as the 18 months, that active status now changes or reverts back to inactive, even though I still got a BIC, but I'm still now inactive. And as we're going to talk about a little later, you can't do much with an inactive status license. Is that right?
That's right. You got it. 100%.
All right. Let's see. We got another application problem here, and let's take a look at that one.
Sure. True or false? We're back to 50-50. I feel better already. A provisional broker may dual affiliate with their local firm and a licensed team entity that works within the same office location as the local firm. So suite 419B here, are they both in 419B? That's what it sounds like. Such as, if we call it Team Awesome of Paracle Realty, right? And I think so. I think they can, but only because the team entity firm shares the same physical location as the main firm. So could they dual affiliate with one firm in Raleigh and one firm in Cary? No. But as long as they're both in the same physical location, then you can.
All right. Yeah. We were totally reiterating and emphasizing that particular point. Location. That comes into play even when we're talking about dual affiliation. That's what makes the difference. All right. We've got one more quiz question here for them, and then we'll stop and take a break after this one. True or false? Another one. Hey, I like these odds again.
Coin flip, right? If in doubt, flip a coin. True or false? Broker Bobby must be a current North Carolina realtor to earn compensation for a real estate transaction. And I like what they're doing here. I like this shenanigan. I'm going to pause for a sec. You guys out there in Zoom land, think about it. And there are certain things that are true. Broker Bobby must be current, but a current what? He must be a current broker. He must be an active broker, but you do not have to be a realtor to earn compensation. So I'm going to say, regretfully, this one is false. Remember, an active / current North Carolina broker's license is required, but not a realtor membership. Realtor memberships are nice, right? They're great, but they're not required to earn real estate compensation. What is required is a active current broker license.
Yeah, I like how you're using the word current here. Again, that might have thrown some of our folks watching because we've been saying active, inactive all of this time. But here, just like they will experience in some test questions, they may see the word current instead of active, but knowing that that is essentially the same thing. That's what we mean. And again, reiterating in this question that a realtor designation has nothing to do with your license necessarily. It's not a license type, and therefore it doesn't have anything to do with the compensation of us as real estate agents in a transaction. Just a separate professional designation that many licensees hold in addition to their license. So good one to remember that. Oh, Broker Bobby. Doesn't have to be a realtor, but does have to be active or current, as we just learned. All right, Rob, well, what do you say we give our audience a break? We need one as well. So let's pause here now, and then we'll come back and continue on with some additional statuses, starting with the next one of broker status. So we just covered provisional broker, AKA PB, what a PB can and can't do. A lot of that's about dual affiliation as well, remembering when a PB can dual affiliate, when they can't. And talking about the educational requirements of a PB, how to essentially drop that P, as we call it, become the full B, full broker status, And again, that has around the 18 months. Yeah, I did it too. 18-month period where you complete those 90 hours of post-licensing education courses, 30 hours each. So that's kind of the majority of what we want you guys to take away from that provisional broker status. Again, we'll take a break here, come back and pick up where we left off with broker status.